Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. Today we're making this, what I've called a display gift box. I have a belly band around the outside, which is holding the two doors together. And then as the doors pull apart, we have this element which pulls apart and displays inside like so. The bottom part here is a 1-inch tall tray and it's 2.5 by 2.5, and the overall box height is 5 inches. So the idea is that you would perhaps put something which was already in a box, like a bottle of perfume for instance, or you would make another taller box which could slot in this tray inside, and that would have your gift in. You could pull that out and then you have the display element like so. The belly band, of course, is an optional means of closure. You could, in fact, before you add the pattern paper on, add some ribbon and then have a ribbon bow at the front, or some other type of closure which runs from one door across to the other. I would recommend when we come to the construction element and the order that we glue the pieces in, you look at that first, because you might think, oh, I'm sure I could do that a slightly easier way. I've obviously done it the way that I found easiest, but as I say, you might want to adhere yours together in an alternative order. So without further ado, let's put the box together. The first thing we're going to do is make the display piece, which is at the back. And I'm going to use some pattern paper for mine, and you'll need a piece which is 11 times 4 3/4. On the short side, score at 1 inch. Rotate to the long side and score at 4 1/4 and 6 3/4. Bring in your ruler. I'm going to flip my piece over to work on the reverse. I'm going to line my ruler up with the 2-inch mark down the left hand side and make a mark at 2 1/4 inches and 8 3/4 of an inch. Move your ruler down to 2 3/4 and make a mark at 1/4 of an inch and 10 3/4 of an inch, and then bring your ruler down to the score line, so that will be at 3 3/4 of an inch, and make a pencil mark at 1.5, 3, 8 and 9.5. Fold and burnish along the score lines. Bring in your stylus and ruler, and we're going to score from the mark at 1/4 of an inch down to this first mark on the score line, like so. And then from the second pencil mark down to the second pencil mark on the score line, like so, and then do the same on the other side. Now you can extend your score line up into the cardstock or the paper if you find it easier. And now I'm going to put in my cut lines from the first pencil mark across to the second pencil mark, like so, and then from the second pencil mark up to the top of the score line, like so, and then we'll do the same this side. So you can see that's the shape of our display piece. So we're going to cut our piece into shape. So I've got my small section at the bottom, and I'm going to start by cutting up the score line to the first horizontal, and do the same this side, like so. Rotate, and I'm going to remove this section. So I'm cutting along the score line and cutting that section away. Rotate, and I'm going to do the same for this end. And now we can cut along our cut lines to shape the top of the piece. So that's the shape of our piece. And then I'm going to cut approximately 1/2 inch away from the 2 outer score lines, and then just take a wedge from the tops of those. I'm going to flip this over to the right side. So the 2 central folds are going to come up like so, and then we're going to fold back on the next score line like so. And then we're going to fold in on the outer score line. So your piece is going to look like this. So that is our winged section, and we're now going to make the doors. So with the doors, you'll need 2 pieces, which are 5 inches times 6 1/4 inches. And along the 5 inch side, score at 1 1/4 and 3 3/4. Rotate to the long side and score at 1 1/4 and 6 1/4. Fold and burnish. So if you have your piece with the 1/2 inch score line at the bottom, we're going to remove the bottom left and right hand rectangles, and you want to cut the sections away here as straight as possible, because that is going to be the base of the door, so that will be visible. And then we're going to take a wedge from the end of the tab, rotate the piece 180 degrees. We're going to cut down these score lines to the horizontal, and again these side sections that we're cutting will be visible. That will be the roof of the doors, as it were. So we're now left with these 2 square tabs. I've cut mine incorrectly. You will have a full square tab here and a full square tab here, and you want to cut those down to approximately 1/2 inch to create a glue tab, and then cut a wedge from either end. But you want to end up with 2 pieces which look like this. So the boxes will come around, and that's how the door is going to be formed. But we're going to put in the display, or the winged piece as I'm calling it now, because I think it's going to be easier to do that before we enclose the shape of this box. So we'll start with the right hand door. So you want to fold your piece over so it sits like so. So you're tucking the wing in, and then your glue tab, the underside of your cardstock, will be sticking outwards like so. We're going to add some glue to the glue tab, and you want to make sure you get it on the glue tab only. Bring in your left hand door, and we're going to sit the bottom edge of your patterned paper or your cardstock along with the bottom edge of your door like so. Line up the score line of the door with the score line of the display piece, and then we're going to flip the door over. Just burnish that down. So you can see that is now adhered inside. I'm going to fold in the opposite door, add glue to the glue tab, bring in the other door. Make sure that the bottom edges are lined up. Line up the score line of the door with the score line of the display piece. Make sure your piece is all running square. You want your doors to be lined up at the bottom, and flip the second door over and burnish that into place. So now you've got your 2 doors attached to your central piece. So we're now going to add our doors together, flip everything over. So we're going to add glue onto these 2 small glue tabs. We'll add glue onto this one to start with, and bring this across to form one side. Now, if you think you might find it easier to make the doors up and then add in the display piece, obviously you can go that route. I just felt that this was going to be easier. So we'll now add glue onto this tab, and this will come across like so. And then I'm going to do the same on this piece. So that's how the piece comes together. So we're now going to make the base box. So I'm going to now make a 1-inch tall tray to go in the base, and then I will either make a separate box which my treats will go in, which can come out, or I will have something which is already in a box, maybe a bottle of perfume or something, which is going to fit inside the tray. So I have a piece of cardstock which is 1/16 of an inch under 4.5 inches times 1/16 of an inch under 4.5 inches. Score on all 4 sides at 1 inch. Fold and burnish along all of the score lines. So let's make up our tray. So we're going to cut up the first score line, and then I'm going to take a wedge. You want to make sure you do remove the score line so that you can get a nice crisp look. And glue this one together. This is our tray. So we're now going to stick everything together. I'm going to add glue to the back 1-inch section here, and that is going to sit inside the back of the tray. So that is going to sit in the back like so. You might need to just shape this slightly just so that it fits in neatly. Let's just take a little slither off there. So that's going to sit in there like so. Make sure it's sitting in straight and burnish it down. So that sits in there like so. And I'm going to add glue to these glue tabs. You can see I've taken this apart because originally I had this decorative piece on the outside of the tray and the doors weren't quite stretching around. So we're going to stick that onto there like so. Bring that door over, sitting nice and squarely, and then we're going to add onto this one, bring that one over and get that one sitting squarely. So that's my doors in place, which come together nicely at the front. So the doors will open like so, and you'll have your display piece. So I'm going to let the box dry and go ahead and add the pattern paper onto the outside, and then I'll come back and give you the sizes. So here's my finished decorated piece. You can see the box comes together nicely at the front. I'll give you the sizes of the pattern paper that I've used. So for the sides, we have 2 pieces. These were 4 3/4 times 2 1/4. For the doors, you'll need 4 pieces, which are 4 3/4 by 1. And for the top edge here, you'll need 2 pieces, which are 1 by 2 1/4. And as I said at the beginning, I've just created a simple belly band, which just runs around the outside and secures on the front like so. Overall, I'm really pleased with how this one has come out, and if you've enjoyed today's video, I have a similar style box with a fan element on the inside, which I will link in the top corner. I hope you've enjoyed today's project. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel, and until next time, thanks for watching.